Hi, this is Frizana for ITWeb. We're sitting down with Google's new country manager for South Africa, Luke Mckend. Welcome, Luke, and thanks for sharing your time with us.
Pleasure, thank you. Yeah.
So just a bit of background about yourself, where you've come from up until this point.
Sure. Well, I'm originally South African, and I suppose grew up in a couple of different places, which is quite interesting because originally from Cape Town.
Okay.
However, spent a large part of my schooling up in a place called Palabora, which is about 5 or 6 hours north drive from Joburg. Not many people actually know where it is, but it's on the border of the Kruger Park. Finished my schooling in Fishhoek, of all places, and then went to Stellenbosch. So got to see a lot of the country as I was growing up. It was fantastic. Once I had finished off at Stellenbosch, I worked, my first job was actually quite interesting, was supporting small businesses through an initiative called the SBLC initiative that was supported by government and by corporates, which was really about supporting small businesses, providing training, and in some cases actually providing premises for small businesses to grow their businesses within.
And this was still here in South Africa?
Yes, that was all in South Africa. That was in fact in Stellenbosch. But I suppose, as most South Africans did in sort of the mid-90s, you start to think, well, there's actually a lot of the world to go and see. And I felt that it was time to do that. Went to London with a view of staying there for a much shorter period of time than I ended up spending.
As everyone does.
Yes. And 12 years later, here I am. In the meantime, in London, I'd worked in recruitment advertising, joined a tech startup that was fortunately quite successful, which we sold. Thereafter joined Google. So I've been with Google probably for about just under 3.5 years. And in this role for the last 3 months, and officially back at home in South Africa probably for about a month or so.
Happily?
Oh, absolutely. And absolutely thrilled to be back.
Okay. Some of Google's focuses for South Africa for this year.
Yeah, Google's in a really interesting position in South Africa. I think there's some fantastic things that we can do. There's a couple of different focuses. Probably the most important right now is just after a flurry of activity last year, launching a huge range of products, everything from YouTube to Maps to Street View to voice search. All sorts of different things happened last year. Is now to really just consolidate on all of that growth. And to lay the foundations for future projects to be delivered in South Africa. So we're looking at growing the team. We're hiring into the team at the moment, and getting new people is really, really important, and then making sure that they're in a position to really contribute as much as possible. That's a huge focus right now. The other part of that is working with our advertisers and working with our clients in South Africa. There's a huge amount of untapped potential, we think, in the internet economy in South Africa, and working with our clients to help them understand how to deliver better ROI from their online investments is pretty key to us. And there are a couple of associated groups of people who work with clients, like agencies, that I think we need to work much more closely with than we have done in the past. And I think engaging with those guys over the course of 2011 is very important. One of the things that differentiates South Africa from some of our other more developed markets is also the connection that we have with the rest of Africa. And I think that's particularly interesting because some of the issues that are faced in Africa around, for instance, access to the internet, or the lack of local content, or even just making sure that our products are relevant for communities that we're serving in Africa, are the kind of issues that people don't get to address in Europe. And I think that's fascinating. We're in a fortunate position that we've got some really interesting work to do around that as well.
Do you think there'll be much greater growth for Google in terms of new cables coming in terms of broadband access? Like, what changes do you think that'll bring for Google?
Well, I think if you look at the impact that some of the cables have had already, you've seen internet users grow by, I think Arthur Goldstack was suggesting, by something like 15% year on year, in that sort of range. That's already fairly significant growth. And we'd imagine that, I would see that in 2011, there's no reason why that growth shouldn't continue at something like that rate. It's also phenomenal to see how people are adopting mobile as their first route into the internet. and that's something that doesn't necessarily happen elsewhere. So I think that's quite exciting, and we're yet to see how that plays out. But you can imagine that that might facilitate more access than ADSL connections might in the short term.
Does that affect Google's strategy in any way in terms of mobile?
Well, I think if you look at our sort of mobile strategy at the moment, it's largely centered around Android.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you and your readers will have read extensively about our approach there. Android is incredibly important because what it's enabled manufacturers to do is to bring out devices at much lower cost. And you're starting to see the fruits of that. You see, I think Huawei brought out a phone in Kenya recently that was just above $100 or so. And perhaps later on in there you might see a flurry of or a plethora of additional devices coming in at about that sort of price level.
Just in terms of this whole IPv6 changeover and stuff, I don't know if you want to address anything like that.
I'd love to be able to talk knowledgeably about it.
Okay.
However, it's not really my core field of expertise.
Sure, that's fine. Let me just have a look at, so we can just get the formality. Like there were issues happening around Street View, I know, all over the world. Were there any in South Africa in terms of the whole privacy and security issue?
I think our response to Street View in South Africa has been overwhelmingly positive. We had fantastic response to the stuff that we did for the World Cup in particular. There were all sorts of different interesting nooks and crannies that we were able to show people that they wouldn't have been able to see. But even more so, I think the fact that local South Africans have been able to find out about places they would never have been to using Street View, I think has been pretty cool. And I think that's the tenor of the response that we've got in South Africa.
Okay. Other highlights from last year for Google?
There were quite a few actually. I think if you look at YouTube for one. I mean the fact that we were able to launch YouTube in South Africa, it's so important to get YouTube out there because it gives a platform for people to deliver local content. And I think that's incredibly important. One of my personal highlights was being able to be here for G South Africa. So it was quite a big event. I think both days over 500 people, and we were able to launch voice search at the time, which in a number of local languages as well. So you're talking about English, Zulu, and Afrikaans. I thought that was fascinating. And the response that we had was once again is overwhelmingly positive. So that was a personal highlight to be able to be there for that.
Just something I know was wondering about myself recently was Google. I'm not sure if it's South African focused yet, but I guess that's my question. Is the whole art gallery online kind of thing? Are there any plans for a South African focus anytime soon?
I mean, it's a fantastic project. I was having a look at some of them this morning. I'm not quite sure. I'd love for South Africans to be involved in that one way or another, and I think we all would. It's possible, I'm sure, in the future. However, at this stage, I don't have anything that we could commit to.
That's